The Tantalus base is constructed on Mars in the 2040s. Today marks the end of a 6-month mission for an 8-person team of astronauts collecting samples. The spaceship Aurora will arrive from Earth to get them in 19 hours. As Vincent and Rebecca navigate a rover toward an excavation site in the Martian desert, they see an approaching sandstorm. When they arrive, Vincent contacts Kim over the radio to let her know it's time to get back to the base and reminds her to prepare for leaving. But Kim ignores him, determined to discover quality samples, and continues digging. Even though he is excited to come home, Vincent tells Rebecca that he is sick of Kim's attitude and doesn't look forward to the 6-month journey back to Earth while they wait. When Kim does board the rover, she laments that they are returning empty-handed, as if the 6 months were insufficient to achieve anything. They get a call from Captain Charles on their way back, telling them to come back to work quickly as they need assistance repairing their communications connection to the Aurora. Richard at the base fixes the signal problem, but still needs to address the power outage caused by the storm. In the meanwhile, Marco wants to replace a faulty gamma sensor, so he begs Charles for one final trip to the dig site. After some hesitation, Charles gives in and instructs him to return before dusk, urging him to bring Richard along as well. Kim laments that she was made to return while the males were allowed to go again as the trio arrives and witnesses Marco and Richard departing. Richard is surprised to discover, when traveling to the location, that Marco had lied and that all they would be doing was selecting a sample of a microscopic anomaly rather than fixing anything. Vincent fixes the cooling system back at the base while conversing with psychologist Robert. He believes that the Aurora's approach trajectory suggests that the driver is intoxicated. As Kim searches Marco's workstation for the true reason for the trip, she finds a picture of cavities on a rock. Rebecca notes that the holes seem to be microbial borings, and the microscopic examination of the material reveals evidence of bacterial cell division. Since Marco won't take responsibility, this indicates that he lied. Calling Richard and Marco in a fit of rage, Charles declares that the dig location is now off-limits. But because of the poor signal, Marco instructs Richard to act as if he didn't hear Charles. Then, when Marco examines the soil sample he took from the dig site more closely, the earth under him starts to tremble and then abruptly collapses, trapping Marco below. Richard bolts from the rover to assist, but the steam makes it difficult for him to see. Shortly after Richard requests assistance, Marco is rescued by Charles and Lauren. Lauren challenges Richard's belief that Marco has passed away and attempts to descend the abyss. She is abruptly stopped by Charles, who informs her that the hole is too hazardous as it is. They agree that Lauren will wait to keep an eye on things while Charles and Richard go back to the base to get the appropriate rescue equipment. Kim informs Charles at the base that she wants to make their discoveries public. When Richard brings out the fact that Marco passed away, Kim becomes enraged because she believes Marco should have followed procedure. After reviewing the report, Mission Control authorizes the crew to collect Marco, even though there may be a danger. Robert asks Charles to chastise Kim for her actions before he leaves since he doesn't deserve the blame for Marco's death, but Charles responds that he bears responsibility for every crew member's error. Lauren waits in the rover as Charles drives Rebecca, Robert, and Vincent back to the location. She attempts to alert Charles via the radio when she hears someone attempting to enter the car, but the storm interference prevents him from hearing her. Lauren is gone by the time the crew gets to the dig site. They believe she fell into the hole, so Vincent descends with his suit fastened to a rope. He sees a microbiological creature developing on the rock formation just as he is about to reach the bottom. Vincent feels worse the lower he descends, and he begins to hyperventilate while seeing memories of his unintentional imprisonment in the Aurora. The others quickly tug the rope to bring him back after seeing this. After a little while to collect himself, Vincent informs them he didn't see anybody down there. Robert then scans the surroundings and is taken aback to see 2 sets of tracks going toward the base. They could have just stolen the rover, therefore this is absurd. When the crew phones Kim to alert her of potential casualties, Kim responds by pointing out that, should Marco's suit be broken, he may be experiencing oxygen deprivation-induced brain damage. Richard looks at the monitoring system at that same time and notices 2 people 50 meters from the facility. Richard walks to the airlock to allow them in as Kim attempts to establish a radio connection with them. Richard opens the airlock as Marco collapses to the ground, exposing a hole in his helmet, and Kim notices a strange person moving slowly toward the facility. Richard assists him in taking it off, but he recoils in disbelief upon seeing that Marco now resembles a zombie. Marco abruptly gets to his feet, takes an electric drill, and attacks Richard, piercing his abdomen. Despite falling, Richard is able to move enough to set off the alarm. Kim rushes to the airlock, but she hides in another room as soon as she spots Marco. Lauren soon discovers she is also infected when she gets to the airlock. Despite his suffering, Richard is able to escape and close the door after running into another room. Instead, Lauren pursues Kim, who, not being a soldier, begins to battle the thing as best she can. Marco soon follows and Kim defends herself with everything in the room. Kim knocks the other thing down and escapes, closing this door as well, as one of the creatures becomes sidetracked and drinks some liquid on the floor. Richard makes it to shout "Mayday" over the radio before collapsing. Charles finds a huge mess inside and orders the others to wait outside while he investigates. As Marco begins smashing through the glass door, he discovers Kim. Charles tells her to put on a suit as he attempts to fend off the animals. Charles attempts to argue with Marco once he escapes soon, but it doesn't seem that the diseased brain comprehends language. Charles rushes to the airlock as Kim departs the base after getting dressed. The infected astronauts catch up to him and stab him in the shoulder as he is leaving. Charles eventually leaves and makes his way back to the others. Vincent protests when they deactivate the door to lock their old friends, but Kim explains to him that the monsters aren't human anymore and shows him their faces. Rebecca does her best to cure Charles' wound despite not being a doctor as the gang flees inside the greenhouse dome. Charles requests the team to let his family know that they were on his mind as he becomes aware that he is dying and becomes depressed since he can no longer recall what his family looks like. Robert is suddenly grabbed by the neck by Charles, requiring the others to pull him back as they attempt to soothe him. Vincent, in a state of desperation, restrains him until Charles becomes unresponsive. Charles then falls out after telling the team they would never see home. Kim binds Charles to the table right away, just in case his corpse reanimates like Marco and Lauren, even if Vincent believes he is dead. Vincent covers the corpse with a blanket, clearly upset by what he sees. As they debate what to do, Vincent notices the illness growing and looks beneath the cover. They hear an explosion outside a few moments later, and when they check the monitor, they see that the infected astronauts have used an explosive on the airlock to escape. Charles' body trembles for a few seconds as they approach the dome and begin beating on the entrance. Vincent offers to use the oxygen pipe to return to the base and repair the system as the crew is trying to communicate with the space station, but the communications are down. Rebecca draws blood from Charles after Vincent departs and discovers that he is also sick. A few minutes later, terrorized by flashbacks of his space station mishap, Vincent stops crawling because he is experiencing a panic attack. Rebecca comforts him over the radio, telling him that everyone on the squad shares his fear. Even though there is blood everywhere when he eventually makes it to the base, he still goes to work. Returning to Rebecca, she injects Charles with a solution and questions if antibiotics might eradicate the bacterium. Rebecca believes that Charles may be battling the virus because of the way his body begins to tremble and squirm. Kim draws attention to the fact that the movement is just the body's responses responding naturally. Rebecca takes another blood sample after the body stops moving and finds that the bacterium is no longer growing, indicating that the treatment just slows the infection's growth rather than curing it. In order to evaporate the solution and utilize it against the animals, Kim puts it into a decontamination spray. In the meanwhile, Vincent makes touch with Aurora, but the power cuts out before he can inform them of the predicament. When Robert looks at the monitor, he sees that their ailing pals are returning to the base because they are unable to break through the dome doors. In order to entice the animals to the airlock and provide medicines to them, the crew decides to open the door. When an infected astronaut enters, the decontamination spray kicks in, causing the monster to slump to the ground and start to writhe. Regretfully, Rebecca later learns that the bacterium is beginning to get resistant to the medication, meaning the benefit is only temporary. When Vincent discovers Richard is infected while trying to restore the electricity, he doesn't think twice to strike Richard in the head with his flashlight. Vincent goes to the oxygen pipe and crawls back because the beast won't go down no matter how hard he smashes it. Rebecca is asked to unlock the panel, but he warns her that he did not seal the pipe's other end. After the others put on their helmets and remove Vincent, Kim takes 2 antibiotic bottles and hurls them at Richard, who isn't stopped. In an attempt to get away, Vincent and Rebecca rush to unlock the airlock. Robert rushes and closes the door behind him as he realizes that Charles' corpse is beginning to reanimate at that same moment, leaving Kim to perish at the hands of the animals. He just informs Vincent and Rebecca that Kim was unable to make it when he joins them. Robert kicks it several times in rage as the thing they sprayed earlier begins to stir in the airlock. When the group eventually opens the airlock and flees, Rebecca is stabbed in the leg with scissors by their infected companion. Thankfully, the team manages to get to the rover quickly, and Vincent gives Rebecca an antibiotic shot in the hopes that it would strengthen her body's defenses against the germs. After leaving the rover, the crew quickly discovers they don't have enough power to make it to the landing place. Because of her injuries, Rebecca is unable to walk them there. Robert believes Rebecca should be left behind since she is sick, while Vincent believes they should bring her to the base to get medical attention for her wounds. Rebecca brings up the possibility that Robert is also sick since Charles clutched his neck, but Robert sidesteps the conversation. They go to the excavation site instead since he recalls there is another rover there. When they arrive at the proper location, Robert walks to the other rover and uses the radio to inform Vincent to leave Rebecca. Robert leaves alone himself after Vincent declines. When Vincent emerges to stop him, it is already too late. Vincent and Rebecca drive the rover into the sandstorm in the hopes of losing the infected individuals. But to make things worse, he notices that they are being followed by them. When the rover's batteries are charged by the sun, Vincent believes they will have sufficient power to reach the landing spot early in the morning. In the meanwhile, the Aurora leaves the space station and makes its way to Mars. When Vincent awakens in the morning, a transmission from the space station tells him that help is on the way in the shape of a rescue squad. Vincent attempts to reply to the message, but his voice is muffled by the space station. Then he finds out that Rebecca abandoned the rover, and he starts going in her direction. When he eventually locates her, Rebecca advises him to remain still since she can already feel the effects of the sickness. Vincent rushes to help her out of desperation, but Rebecca takes off her helmet and suffocates to death. Her body comes back to life in a matter of minutes, attacking Vincent as he struggles to hold her back. When Rebecca begs him to put a stop to things for her, Vincent has pity and gives her a rock toss. Vincent dashes to the landing location as soon as he sees the Aurora arriving a little while later. Vincent attempts to tell the Aurora not to open the hatch since there are 3 more animals who are unfortunately headed there, but the storm interference prevents them from hearing him. Vincent hears the animals' terrified cries over the radio as soon as the rescue crew emerges. The monsters attack and murder them. Despite their lack of awareness, the animals continue to feed on the rescue squad as he continues on. Additionally, a corpse in the worst possible condition is decomposing. Next, Vincent goes inside the spacecraft, locks the door, and discovers Robert in the cockpit. Although Vincent is still self-aware, he can already detect symptoms of illness and believes they cannot take the chance of bringing the bacterium to Earth. Robert assaults him right away, and while they struggle, Robert stabs Vincent's helmet. Robert then attempts to pilot the spacecraft, but Vincent stabs him in the back with the knife. The men keep fighting as the spacecraft begins to tremble and take off on its own, and Vincent repeatedly strikes Robert in the head until he stops moving. Subsequently, he removes his blood-stained helmet and opens the hatch, launching Robert's corpse into space. Vincent thinks of Rebecca consoling him during the brief moment when he is having trouble breathing. Vincent then notifies the station by message of all that transpired. He discloses his intention to crash the spacecraft on Mars as soon as he has any symptoms, since he is aware that there is a possibility he is infected. He waits for an answer, the Aurora carrying on with its flight.